Michael Jackson's tour manager Frank DiLeo stood in the hotel suite in Los Angeles, holding a phone and shaking his head in frustration. "Michael, I already canceled it. The venue is too small, the town is in the middle of nowhere, and frankly, it doesn't make financial sense. We lose money on a show that size. It was a booking mistake from the beginning." But Michael Jackson, sitting on the edge of the bed with his schedule in his hands, wasn't backing down. "Frank, 200 people bought tickets expecting to see me perform. 200 people in a town that probably never gets concerts like this. You can't just cancel on them." Frank sighed with the exhaustion of someone who'd had this argument many times before. "Michael, you're the biggest star on the planet. You perform for stadiums with 50,000 people. This is a high school gymnasium in Temperance, Michigan. Population 3,000. It's not even on most maps. We've already issued refunds. The decision is made." Michael looked at Frank with an expression that was part determination, part something Frank couldn't quite identify. Sadness, maybe, or disappointment. "Then I'll go anyway," Michael said quietly. "Without the crew, without the production, without you if necessary. But I'm not breaking a promise to 200 people just because it's not profitable." It was October 15th, 1988. Michael Jackson was in the middle of his Bad World Tour, performing to sold-out stadiums across America and breaking every record in entertainment history. The tour was a massive production involving hundreds of crew members, 18-wheeler trucks full of equipment, and logistics that required military precision. Every show was planned months in advance. Every venue vetted for capacity and technical specifications. Every detail choreographed to perfection. The Temperance, Michigan show had been a mistake from the beginning. Someone in the booking office had accidentally confirmed a date at Temperance High School's gymnasium as part of a community outreach program without realizing it conflicted with the tour's major stadium dates. The venue could hold maybe 300 people maximum. There was no proper sound system, no lighting infrastructure, no backstage facilities that could support a Michael Jackson production. When Frank DiLeo discovered the error, he'd immediately canceled the show, issued full refunds to the 217 people who'd bought tickets, and assumed that was the end of it. But Michael had found out about the cancellation, and he was furious. Not the explosive anger that some stars showed, but a quiet, firm disappointment that was somehow worse. "Frank," Michael had said, "do you know what it means to people in a town like Temperance, Michigan to have a concert canceled? It's not like New York or Los Angeles where there's always another show, another option. For them, this might have been a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And we took it away because it wasn't convenient for us." Frank had tried to explain the logistics, the impossibility of doing a Michael Jackson show in a high school gym, the insurance issues, the security concerns. But Michael had made up his mind. "If you won't organize it officially, I'll go myself. Unofficially, just me, maybe a few musicians, and whatever equipment that school has." Frank, recognizing that Michael was serious and knowing from years of experience that Michael Jackson didn't make empty threats, had tried one last approach. "Michael, if you really want to do this, at least let me come with you. Let me bring minimal crew, basic sound equipment, something so you're not performing in completely unprofessional conditions. We'll keep it quiet, no press, no publicity. Just you keeping a promise." Michael had agreed to that compromise, and 2 days later, on October 17th, 1988, a small convoy of 3 vehicles drove into Temperance, Michigan at dusk. Michael Jackson was in a regular passenger van, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, accompanied by Frank DiLeo, 2 backup musicians, a sound engineer, and 2 security guards. That was it. No elaborate entourage, no trailers full of equipment, no spectacle. Just a small group of people coming to keep a promise to a town that had already been told their concert was canceled. Temperance, Michigan was the kind of town that time seemed to have forgotten. Population 2,847 according to the sign at the town limits. One main street with a hardware store, a diner, a post office, and not much else. The high school served the entire county, and for most of the kids who attended, graduation meant leaving Temperance for opportunities elsewhere. There wasn't much happening in Temperance, which was exactly why the original booking of a Michael Jackson concert had seemed like a miracle to the town's residents. When Frank had canceled the show 2 weeks earlier, the disappointment had been crushing. The tickets had only cost $15 each, affordable even for the working-class families that made up most of Temperance's population, and 217 people had bought them. For many, it would have been their first and probably only chance to see a major concert. The refunds had been processed, apologetic letters had been sent, and everyone in Temperance had gone back to accepting that nothing exciting ever happened in their forgotten little town. Nobody in Temperance knew that Michael Jackson was coming. Frank had called the high school principal, Robert Morrison, the night before and sworn him to absolute secrecy. "Mr. Morrison, this is Frank DiLeo, Michael Jackson's tour manager. I know we canceled the concert, but Michael wants to come anyway. Tomorrow night. No publicity, no announcement. We'll set up basic equipment during the day while school is in session, and then tomorrow evening, I need you to quietly spread word that anyone who had tickets to the original show should come to the gymnasium at 7 p.m. Tell them to tell no one outside of Temperance. This has to stay contained, or we'll have thousands of people descending on your town, and it'll be a security nightmare." Robert Morrison had thought it was a prank call until Frank had provided verification that left no doubt he was who he claimed to be. The principal had spent the entire next day in a state of surreal disbelief, watching as a small crew quietly set up sound equipment in the gymnasium while students attended classes in other parts of the building. He'd spent that evening making quiet phone calls to the 217 ticket holders, swearing each of them to secrecy and telling them to come to the school at 7 p.m. Most of them thought he was joking. Some hung up on him thinking it was a cruel prank. But word spread through the small town quickly, and by 6:30 p.m. on October 17th, people began arriving at Temperance High School, unsure what to believe but unable to stay away on the chance it might be real. By 7 p.m., all 217 original ticket holders were present, along with about 30 additional people who'd heard through the grapevine and couldn't resist coming to see if the impossible was actually happening. The gymnasium was set up with basic folding chairs arranged in rows facing a small stage that the drama department normally used for school plays. There were no elaborate lights, no pyrotechnics, no massive video screens. Just a modest sound system, some basic stage lighting, and a sense of anticipation so thick it was almost difficult to breathe. At 7:15 p.m., Frank DiLeo walked onto the stage and took the microphone. The crowd fell instantly silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank said, his voice carrying through the gymnasium's decent acoustics, 2 weeks ago, we made a mistake. We canceled a show that should never have been canceled. Tonight, someone very special wanted to correct that mistake. Please welcome Michael Jackson. The gymnasium erupted in screams as Michael Jackson walked onto the stage wearing simple black pants, a red shirt, and a black fedora. No elaborate costume, no dramatic entrance, just Michael walking out like he was arriving at a friend's house. The 247 people in that gymnasium screamed with an intensity that rivaled any stadium crowd Michael had ever performed for. They screamed not just with excitement, but with disbelief, with gratitude, with the overwhelming emotion of witnessing something impossible becoming real. Michael stood center stage, smiling at the relatively tiny crowd, and he began to speak before the music started. "Good evening, Temperance," he said, his voice warm and genuine. "I heard you guys got stood up, and I don't like breaking promises. So I'm here to make it right. Tonight isn't going to be like my usual shows. We don't have all the production, all the bells and whistles. Tonight it's just going to be me, some music, and all of you. Let's just have fun together, okay?" What followed was the most intimate and extraordinary performance of Michael Jackson's career. Without the pressure of performing for tens of thousands, without the need to maintain the perfectionism of a massive stadium production, Michael relaxed in a way his band and Frank had rarely seen. He performed his hits, Billie Jean, Beat It, Thriller, The Way You Make Me Feel, but he performed them differently. More raw, more spontaneous, more connected to the audience. Between songs, Michael talked to the crowd. He told stories about growing up in Gary, Indiana, a small town not unlike Temperance. He talked about his brothers, about learning to perform in tiny venues before the Jackson 5 got their big break. He took requests, and when someone shouted for a song from his childhood, Michael sat on the edge of the stage and sang "I'll Be There" a cappella, his voice filling the gymnasium with so much emotion that people were crying openly. The intimacy of the small venue meant Michael could see every face. He could make eye contact with individuals, respond to their reactions in real time, interact with the audience in ways that were impossible in massive stadiums. During Smooth Criminal, a teenage girl in the front row held up a sign that said, "This is the best night of my life." Michael stopped singing for a moment, walked over to her, and said into the microphone, "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl, maybe 16 years old, managed to stammer, "Jessica." Michael smiled. "Well, Jessica, this performance is dedicated to you and everyone here in Temperance. Thank you for giving me the chance to perform in a way I rarely get to anymore. Just music, no spectacle. Just us." Michael performed for 90 minutes straight, giving everything he had to the small crowd that was giving everything back to him. The energy in that gymnasium was electric in a way that had nothing to do with production values and everything to do with genuine connection. These weren't fans who'd paid hundreds of dollars for tickets and expected a perfectly executed show. These were people from a forgotten town who'd been told they weren't important enough for a concert, and now Michael Jackson himself was proving they mattered. For the final song, Michael did something completely unexpected. He invited the entire audience onto the stage with him. All 247 people crowded onto and around the small stage while Michael performed "Man in the Mirror." People were crying, singing along, holding each other, experiencing something they knew they'd remember for the rest of their lives. When the song ended, Michael didn't rush off stage. He stayed there, surrounded by the Temperance crowd, hugging people, signing autographs, taking photos with a regular camera that someone handed him. He spent 45 minutes just talking to people, hearing their stories, making them feel seen and valued. Frank DiLeo stood at the back of the gymnasium, watching Michael interact with the small-town crowd with a level of genuine joy and relaxation he rarely showed at major venues. Frank realized something in that moment. Michael needed this as much as they did. Needed the reminder of why he performed in the first place. Needed connection rather than worship. Needed to be Michael instead of Michael Jackson for a few hours. One of the people Michael spent time with after the show was a woman named Margaret Williams, 68 years old, who taught music at Temperance High School for 40 years before retiring. Michael sat with her for 15 minutes, asking about her teaching methods, her philosophy of music education, her thoughts on how to inspire young people. Mrs. Williams told Michael something that he would remember for the rest of his life. "You know what makes tonight special? It's not that you're famous. It's that you came when you didn't have to, when nobody would have blamed you for staying away. You came because you gave your word, and you keep your word. That's not celebrity behavior, Mr. Jackson. That's character." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I needed to hear that." By 10 p.m., Michael and his small crew were packing up the basic equipment and preparing to leave. The crowd had finally dispersed, most of them still in states of disbelief about what had just happened. Frank approached Michael as they loaded the van. "That was special," Frank said simply. "I'm sorry I tried to stop you from coming." Michael smiled, looking tired but genuinely happy in a way Frank hadn't seen in months. "Frank, tonight reminded me why I do this. It's not about the stadiums or the records or the spectacle. It's about connection. It's about keeping promises. It's about showing people they matter, especially people who are used to being forgotten." Before leaving Temperance, Michael did one more thing. He left an envelope with Principal Morrison containing a check for $50,000 with instructions that it be used to establish a music program at Temperance High School, providing instruments and instruction for any student who wanted to learn regardless of their family's ability to pay. The story of the Temperance, Michigan concert remained largely unknown for decades. Frank DiLeo kept his promise about no publicity. The people of Temperance, understanding the gift they'd been given, mostly kept quiet about it, not wanting to diminish the intimacy of what had happened by turning it into a media spectacle. A few bootleg recordings circulated among hardcore Michael Jackson fans, but without context, Most people assumed they were from a private rehearsal or a sound check. The full story didn't emerge until after Michael's death in 2009, when Jessica Reynolds, the teenage girl who'd held up the sign that night, wrote an article for a major magazine detailing what had happened in Temperance on October 17, 1988. Her article went viral, and suddenly everyone wanted to know about the legendary secret concert where Michael Jackson had performed for 200 people in a high school gymnasium. Other attendees came forward with their stories, their photos, their memories of that impossible night. Frank DiLeo confirmed the story in interviews, explaining that Michael had insisted on honoring the commitment despite it making no financial or logistical sense. It became one of the most beloved stories in Michael Jackson's legacy, proof that beneath the fame and the spectacle was a man who valued promises and people over profit. Jessica Reynolds, now a music journalist in her 40s, wrote in her article, "That night in Temperance, we didn't see Michael Jackson the superstar. We saw Michael Jackson the human being, a man who could have performed anywhere in the world for millions of dollars, but chose to perform in our forgotten little town for free because he'd given his word. That's not just integrity. That's grace." The bootleg recordings from that night eventually became some of the most treasured pieces of audio in Michael Jackson fan communities, not because of perfect production values, but because they captured something rare. Michael Jackson completely relaxed, spontaneous, genuinely joyful, performing without the pressure of maintaining his carefully crafted image. You can hear him laughing between songs, talking casually with the audience, making mistakes, and not caring, just enjoying the pure act of performing. Margaret Williams, the retired music teacher, lived until 2005. Before she died, she gave an interview where she talked about her conversation with Michael that night. "He told me something I'll never forget," she said. "He told me that performing for 200 people who genuinely wanted to be there was more fulfilling than performing for 50,000 people who just wanted to say they'd seen Michael Jackson." He said the Temperance show reminded him why he fell in love with performing in the first place. Because of connection, not spectacle. The Michael Jackson music program at Temperance High School, funded by the money Michael left behind, has operated continuously since 1988. Over 3 decades, it has provided music education to thousands of students, many of whom have gone on to professional music careers. The program's motto, inscribed on a plaque in a music room, comes from what Michael said that night. "It's not about the size of the stage. It's about the size of your heart." In 2010, a group of Temperance residents who'd attended the 1988 concert pooled their resources to create a small memorial in the high school gymnasium. A simple plaque on the wall reads, "On October 17, 1988, Michael Jackson performed here for 247 people. He came because he'd given his word, and he kept his word. He reminded us that small towns and small crowds matter, that promises matter, that people matter. This night will never be forgotten." The Temperance concert has become legendary in music history, not despite its small scale, but because of it. In an era when concerts have become increasingly massive, increasingly impersonal, increasingly about spectacle over substance, the story of Michael Jackson performing in a high school gym for 200 people stands as a reminder that intimacy and authenticity matter more than production values. Frank DiLeo said years later, "That Temperance show was probably the best performance I ever saw Michael give. Not technically perfect, but emotionally perfect. He wasn't performing for cameras or critics or history. He was performing for people he could see, touch, talk to. He was performing because he wanted to, not because he had to." That's when Michael was at his absolute best. Several major artists have cited the Temperance concert story as inspiration for their own surprise, small venue performances. The idea of superstars occasionally performing in intimate settings, giving back to communities that don't usually get access to major entertainment, has become more common. But those who know the full story understand that for Michael, the Temperance concert wasn't a publicity stunt or a calculated move. It was simply about keeping a promise. The town of Temperance, Michigan, now has a population of about 7,000, having grown slowly over the decades. But for those who were there on October 17th, 1988, and for their children and grandchildren who've heard the story countless times, Temperance will always be the town where Michael Jackson came to keep his word. Where the biggest star in the world proved that small towns and small crowds deserve the same respect and commitment as massive stadiums and millions of fans. Michael Jackson performed 123 concerts during the Bad World Tour. He performed for over 4 million people across 15 countries. But many who knew him well believe that the most important concert of the entire tour was the one that nobody was supposed to know about. The one in Temperance, Michigan, where 247 people learned that promises matter more than profit, and that the greatest performances are the ones that come from choosing to honor your word, even when nobody would blame you for breaking it. Subscribe now and share this story with someone from a small town who knows what it feels like to be forgotten. Tell us in the comments about a time someone kept a promise to you when they easily could have broken it. Hit that notification bell for more untold stories about the moments when Michael Jackson proved that integrity means doing the right thing even when it's inconvenient and profitable and nobody would know if you didn't. Because sometimes the most legendary performance is the one with the smallest audience. Sometimes the most important show is the one that makes no financial sense, but every human sense. Thank you, Temperance, Michigan, for giving Michael Jackson a place to be human instead of superhuman. And thank you, Michael, for understanding that a promise to 200 people matters just as much as a promise to 200,000. You came when you didn't have to. You performed when it wasn't profitable. You kept your word when breaking it would have been easy. That's not just stardom. That's character. And that's why the Temperance concert will be remembered long after the stadium shows have faded from memory.